everybody to Unity Podcast. My name is Sophie.
My name is Putini.
And today we will talk about women's rights and about women in human rights advocacy because March 8th is Women's Rights Day. So this podcast is dedicated to this subject.
Yes. So, what do you think about women's rights?
Well, I think they're human rights, and therefore we should definitely be tackling them because currently it's not looking super good. We are, experiencing a lot of pushback against women's rights. And on a day like March 8th, it is super important to remember that we really need to push for women's human rights. And that is in line with the topic of Women's Rights Day this year, which is Accelerate Action.
Did you have experienced any pushbacks?
Me personally?
Yeah?
Not really. It's in my personal life, I think I'm very privileged to be around people who don't really discriminate against me. And also I think our working environment, we are very privileged to work in a team that is very progressive in that sense, and also most of us are women.
Yeah.
So personally, no. For me, it's more based on what I see in the news and what I hear from other people. How about you?
Well, for me, I feel like human rights field is quite dominated by women.
Yeah, that's true.
Our organization is filled with women, for example, but I think the pushback in general, like outside of the human rights field, for example, in corporate field, is bigger and more visible than in human rights field, I think. But talking about politics, I feel like men are still dominating in that kind of field, in the politics field, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, advocacy and politics are interlinked. And it is important that also female human rights advocates are being taken serious. So it is, important that we deal with this topic.
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about that. There are so many conventions, right? You have the CEDAW, you have this, you have that. A lot of people are acknowledging that women's right is, those rights are human rights as well. But for me personally, coming from indigenous peoples in the Mekong Delta in South Vietnam, there are women and men who organized the International Women's Day and now being in prison. The thing is that when they were detained, the local authorities were using another kind of reason, another kind of things just to cover it up. But so that happened in 2023. In 2024, they wanted to organize another International Women's Day event, but they got a warning and they had to sign a paper where it said that they are not going to do anything with International Women's Day. So for me, it's like, are we being pushed back because we are women, or are we being pushed back because of our identity of indigenous peoples, or because of something else?
Yeah.
So
I think what's apparent with that is that, not all women are the same, not all women's rights advocates are the same. Mm-hmm. We have different experiences, different identities, and we face different types of barriers, right? And indigenous women will face a lot more barriers than, say, a white human rights advocate in Germany, I would assume.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So we do face a triple discrimination because of being a woman, also being an indigenous people, and low education.
Yeah, and that's where intersectionality comes into it, right?
Yeah.
We have a little message also from our dear colleague Mariana. Mariana is a Brazilian woman, and she also wanted to share with you a little bit her experience and also a little bit the experience of Latin American women, or Brazilian women in particular. We're just gonna play the audio and then we can talk about it a little bit later, yeah?
Yes.
Hi everyone, my name is Mariana. I work in the human rights field, managing international projects and working for social justice. Today I want to share with you my thoughts on women's rights in Latin America and my experience as a Brazilian woman working human rights, both in Latin America and in Europe. So for me, women's rights in Latin America cannot be separated from our history of colonization. And women, especially indigenous and black women, were at the center of this violence, facing forced labor, sexual exploitation, and destruction of their communities. Even after independence, these systems did not disappear. Power remained concentrated in the hands of a few, and structures of inequality continued. Latin America is a place of strong resistance, so women that feel all this oppression have always fought back, creating movements that go beyond asking for inclusion. They are challenging the entire system, demanding justice, land rights, labor rights, and political power. These struggles are led by grassroots organizations, indigenous and Afro-descendant communities, and feminist groups that refuse to accept the oppression as normal. Advocating for women's rights often means facing threats, repression, and political resistance. Yet, despite this, the movements continue to grow and push for change. International institutions talk about helping the global south, but without truly listening to the people who actually live and fight there. The fight for women's rights must be global, intersectional, and deeply aware of history. We cannot talk about justice without recognizing how colonialism shaped the world that we live today. And it is not just about asking for inclusion, but about transforming the systems that continue to exploit and exclude. So as a Brazilian woman working both continents, Latin America and Europe, I see how important it is to create strong networks that challenge the dominant narratives and ensure that the voices from the global south are truly heard and valued.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mariana, for sharing your experience. We have been talking a lot about our own personal experiences as well, because she's from Brazil. She has been working for the Brazilian mission as well, and she shared a little bit horrifying events with me and with you as well. It's really sad how political leaders are dealing with women in the field, especially if you are lower than them. Yeah, it's really heartbreaking, because a lot of girls who also want to work in the political field, they feel hesitated.
Yeah, because gender-based discrimination is an issue, gender-based violence is an issue, hate speech is an issue. So, women human rights defenders and female politicians, women in any field, they face barriers that men might not face. But at the same time, I feel like in our team, we support each other, right?
Yes.
We listen to each other, and yeah, in a sense, we empower each other. And I think that is a super important aspect also of this work.
Exactly, especially with men working and the chairman being really respectful towards us, checking up on us if we're in a certain situation, always checking on us if we're okay, if we're comfortable. So that is really great to have.
For us in our organization, it's definitely women supporting women, but also our male colleagues supporting us, and that too is super important, because at the end of the day we cannot fight this fight alone. Yeah. And then a question for you, Putani, how do you think advocates like me can support indigenous women in their advocacy and in their fight for human rights?
I mean, first of all, don't say, oh my god, I have a niece from Asia as well, or I know someone from Asia, because then you are only focusing on identity and not really on the personal identity, like their name or their favorite food or whatever. So if someone comes up to me and they say, I like anime as well, and I'm like, oh, but I don't watch anime. I don't watch it. The only thing I watch is Shin-chan and Tom and Jerry. But yeah, so being really interested in them as a person really helps, because men don't really see Asian women as women, but they see us as an exotic side bite or whatever. So if women also see us as beautiful creatures or whatever, then it's, I know from women it's comes from another approach, and from men another approach, but still it still has the same approach, right?
Yeah, it's still putting you in a box.
Yeah.
And rather than treating you as a person, it's treating you as a character.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And I can imagine that is really uncomfortable, because then you might not feel seen.
Yes, and never compare your own personal national issues with ours, because that's a little bit weird to compare, because we come from a whole other country, from a whole other environment as well. So comparing still makes the focus laying on yourself and not really on us as person again. A person coming from a third world country, for example. So yeah,
So
we don't need your pity. We don't need your pity, sadness, blah blah blah.
So in conclusion, listen, right?
And listen.
Know when to shut up.
Yeah, exactly.
And support the person as an individual and not as a stereotype.
Yes, exactly. Yeah? And talking about stereotype, I just wanted to say right now with Ramadan going on, and yeah, with a lot of hate crimes against women, and yeah, it's just, I saw this news, and with the Ramadan as well, like it, some people are having certain hate speech towards Muslim, you know, because of, and for me, if I read those kind of news, let me explain the news, right? So what happened is last year, an 18-year-old girl found dead in the Netherlands, in Lelystad, and the perpetrators, yeah, the people who committed the crime were actually her brothers from Muslim religious community. So when I hear the news right now in this week, when the Ramadan started, it is really difficult for me to read the hate speech towards a certain religion, but also, you know, they want to support the victim, right? Because it's a hate crime against women, against her, against
but at the
girl.
same time, you know, then that kind of feeds into stereotypes, harmful stereotypes.
Yeah.
Also against Muslim people in general, but also against Muslim women.
Yeah, the people are still focusing on the religious.
And we're not honoring her name.
Yeah. So that's why we just wanted to mention it here, because right now with Ramadan going on, with a lot of hate speech to Muslim community as well, we would like to put on the focus and honor the victim. Right, so we just didn't want to just close it on this sad note, right? We have a question.
To finish it off a little bit more positive, we wanted to ask you, what is a woman that you admire, and how has she shaped you? How has she inspired you? You can drop that down in the comments, and we will see you next week.
Thank you for watching, and see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.